So now Sneako is says he's a Muslim, even though he doesn't know any lines of the Quran, which says he's a Muslim. He's just trying to establish and figure out himself. And I don't know that he would have gone as far into another camp. It becomes camp A, camp B, as opposed to merely not totally A, which is what I had the grace, I keep using the word grace, the luck to do, was just say, you know what, that isn't for me, but I'm not signing up for all this other stuff. I'm going to find my way.
Yeah.
And
bring you along with me.
Yes.
And now he's literally just like saying jump ship. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that I don't know that that's something that all of his fans will struggle with, but I think as more and more people are on the internet and have more of this stuff that they said potentially thrown in their face, it becomes tougher to go back. It becomes tougher to live with nuance. And it becomes, I think the other thing that is, unlikely to happen is like, let's imagine that there was a middle ground, even like me, a person like me who like, I'm not reaching out to Sneako. I'm not asking him to hang out with me. Like, I don't want to deal with all of his chaos. The person who wants that is the other side, who is recruiting foot soldiers, who wants that. And so, yeah, I just see that there are incentives in place, of course, with the internet that lead to polarization. And this is just me pointing to some of the ones that I hadn't articulated before.
And you brought up another point that you don't think he's going to be incentivized to do his evolution now in this stage with being on the internet in front of people, or just hiding it. So if you can talk a little bit about that.
So two things that got thrown in his face, which I think is a real shame. I understand why though. He insulted this guy, the attractiveness of this guy's girlfriend, and has, called people other things. But he also, Sneako this is, has an appearance where he talks about watching the girl that he's dating sleep with another guy. I don't know if it was at a sex party or an open relationship type thing. So everyone was more than happy to call him a cuck in an insulting way. And he defended the movie Cuties and said that he thought that it was not in support of, child porn or anything like that. And that the overall message of the movie, which if you remember a while ago was on Netflix, I didn't see it, I don't know, was about, moving away from those things and the dangers of that. And I think that, unfortunately, in people's zeal to say this guy is a hypocrite and a bad person, what they've implicitly opened up is whatever hurts him is game. So the cuck insult, the pedophile thing, the you support this, all stuff that people excerpted from their dislike of him, they would not make these arguments to other people in their community. And so they hit him with. And I understand, because they're hitting him because he's a hypocrite and he is very judgmental of other people's lifestyle and says that you're not man enough if you don't do it this way. That's sort of in his ethos, and then has this glaring seeming contradiction in terms of his past sex experiences. But unfortunately, I think what that does is that most times shaming people on their way out the door, whether this is you're in an argument or it's on the internet, makes it less likely that a reconciliation ever occurs, even though it is wildly empowering in the moment to just be like, oh yeah, well you're
yeah.
And I meant of course this isn't what the internet would ever do, and I don't know that I would be able to do this in the moment, but I have felt both of these urges in me at times when I'm upset. The one that is I can speak true words that can hurt you right now, which is what I want to do. Or I can hold my breath or take some deep breaths and try to find a bigger thing of a deeper truth, which is I see how hurt you are. I see how lost you are. And you're hurting me, and I don't want to be near you, which is more mature, and I think has more opportunity and creates more space for that person to grow without unpacking the barbs. That's not to say that you can't call out hypocrisy. You can, but when the intent is to wound, which, by the way, I definitely do. I'm not saying I'm better than this. It just makes it less likely that there will be a reconciliation and polarization continues.
And I mean, if I'm Sneako, I am not telling people my vulnerable stuff anymore. Like, I'm hiding that. And you mentioned this prior off the podcast that I'll just act like I've made changes and then, hold all my vulnerable stuff that he had shared years prior for fear that people will use that to, like you said, have barbs against me. And so the chances that if I were Sneako, that I grow is just going to be in a way that's like pretty inauthentic and just for the camera, and then probably nothing off, like in a way, not off camera am I growing. I'm just like, when the camera turns on, I act like a different person. When the camera turns off, make sure it's really off, because people will use that shit against you when they hate you.
And I think you never, like if he was doing sexual experimentation and finding out and testing that open relationship, you say, screw that. I'm going to move to an ideology that appears more defensible, which is the full on Andrew Tate. I keep my women under control. And you just adopt what has been proven to be a more impregnable ideology that you now need to live by.
Which might not be him either way.
Which may not be appropriate or right for him.
Yeah.
And I do, I think Andrew Tate is also someone who clearly has issues with vulnerability. Listening to his final message, I talked about this on a past podcast of not being supported when kids picked on him, and the only time, not the only time, when he cracked a kid in the face with his lunchbox, his dad said nothing except bought him to get another lunchbox and told him, I'll buy you as many of these as you need. Is like, yeah, well, I see why Andrew Tate doesn't do vulnerability and instead does violence.
Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. Because that has worked in his life, and vulnerability didn't work, and he's not going to reopen that dead end.
And he found a crowd that claps when he does that.
Yes.
Get more lunch boxes.
And he's found it today as well.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate, because he doesn't need it anymore. He's not in that scenario. Well, now in jail, he does need it.
Yes, he's in jail.
Probably he needs that hardness.
Yep.
But he didn't. There was a period of time where he could have softened. Yep. And I'm sorry that he did not take that opportunity.
Right.